Let's go. Let's go.
Okay.
Whatever that TikTok audio is.
Let's go, lesbians. Let's go. That one? That's what I'm thinking. Which one are you talking about?
It's like, okay, let's go. This is like a noise. Let's go, lesbians.
I was like, okay. Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Literary Liberation, where today we'll be discussing the popular book talk thriller, The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose. You can find more literary liberation content on TikTok and Instagram at Literary Liberation, and on Twitter at LitLibPodcast. I'm Kristen, one of the co-hosts, and you can find my personal page at KRXXEXN on all socials.
And I'm Mariah, and you can find me at Hungry Rye on all social media platforms. Let's get into it.
Yes. I don't know if there's specific trigger. I don't think this book has trigger warnings, but I feel like maybe we should do a trigger warning for murder, police brutality.
Girl boss, gaslight, gatekeeping.
Those are definitely triggers.
They are.
So
there is mention of a rapist, but no context in regards to that. I think that's it.
Yeah.
That I can think of.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. It's compared to last week, it's a pretty tame story, honestly.
It really is.
Which is funny to think that a story that follows a murderer is a tame story. We can get into a little bit of the summary of this if anybody hasn't read The Perfect Marriage. It follows Sarah Morgan, a young criminal defense attorney who's in her prime, and she virtually wins every case.
Her husband Adam is a struggling author who has only found minimal success. He becomes jealous of his wife's success and begins resenting her and is no longer in love with her. Thus, he begins an affair with Kelly Summers.
Everything changes when Adam's mistress is found murdered in the bedroom of the Morgans' vacation home. Now, Sarah has found herself defending her husband, a man who claims to be innocent for murder.
Dun, dun, dun.
Which, we can go into this a little bit, I guess, before we do a spoiler warning. We'll do an official spoiler warning. We kind of get into the meat and potatoes, because, again, I think with thrillers, it's very hard to discuss them without doing spoilers for them. I made you read this. I feel like this is something that never happens. I made you read a book. Because normally
it's paced relatively quickly. Like, I don't think it was paced as fast as some books that I've read. That being said, I gave it like a 3.5, mainly because, like, being Marxist and abolitionist reading this and feminist, it's like a train wreck. It's like everything bad that could happen, but also like this
girl bossing though
in real life. Girl bossing, and it left me unsure of what the intentions of the author were, what my takeaways were meant to be as a reader. And for that, I gave it a relatively decent rating. Like, it was very entertaining, I can say that, but there were very obvious plot holes that just didn't make sense all the time.
I ended up giving it 3.75 stars, which is pretty similar rating to you. You can ask Mariah. 3.75 stars is like basically a 5-star in other people's minds, because I'm very harsh with my ratings. I don't ever rate books. I think I've rated 2 books 5 stars this year, and it's King of Scars and Rule of Wolves. So the only 2 books, and I read those in January of this year. I thought it was pretty decent. It was an entertaining thriller that I consumed in a couple hours. You can ask Mariah. Usually it takes me a few days to read a couple books, but this is one that I sat down reading it like 7 o'clock, and I ended up finishing it at like 1 a.m. that night. Like, of course, like playing on my phone and stuff in between and like doing other things, because I actually was working that night. So it's not like I only had reading it, but I sat down and read it probably about 7 and finished it at like 1 or so a.m. So it only took me like a couple hours to truly sit down and read it. And I can appreciate it for it being a book talk thriller, that I think this might be, like, if you're looking for a thriller that's, like, big on book talk, this will probably be, from what I've read, this is the best one so far. Which is, like, I have not a very big pool of books. I've only read Verity, The Housemaid, and Haunting Adeline. Verity, I did not guess the ending for just because I feel like it was so crazy. And the same thing for this. This is one of the only book talk books that I've not been able to see the ending before it happened. And the ending in this book, you really don't find the truth about any of it until the very last chapter, which is, I don't know, interesting, I guess. Like, I think that's very different. And I don't know if maybe if I reread it, if there was maybe more, like, you could get more clues to the ending, but this is definitely something where normally I'm somebody who can very much, like, read the characters and stuff like that, where I did it for Haunting Adeline, and I did it for The Housemaid. I could see each of their characters, like, they were so, like, obviously written in certain ways that I could see what happened, but then for this, I could not predict the ending at all. Like, I had no idea.
Yeah, the author leads you on kind of like a wild, what's the phrase? A wild goose chase?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It is definitely very much like that. It
takes you a lot of different avenues where it could be this person or it could be this person.
Mm-hmm.
But the very end was very
shocking, surprising.
It was shocking, but also I didn't feel.
I wasn't I wasn't like, oh my god, this is absolutely like the most insane ending ever. It was definitely like a wow, I was not seeing that coming sort of ending.
Like a wow, okay. I didn't know it was gonna go that direction.
Yeah. But do you know what this kind of reminds me of? Is like the white women in true crime. Like, I feel like it's always white women that always like write these like books, and they always do this like whole like true crime, like the women that like listen to like the true crime podcast, only watch Dateline sort of thing. You know, that is definitely. And of course, we looked up the author. Geneva Rose is a white woman, so I mean, take that as you will. Especially whenever this book, that it does kind of talk about the problems with the like police industry and our criminal justice system here in America pretty clearly, because that's kind of like what it entirely follows.
That was one of the biggest criticisms I was seeing in the Goodreads rating system. When you click on the 1-star ratings, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, this is unrealistic. The police would have never done this. An investigation
I
never
feel like
would
that
have done
was
this."
the most accurate part about it.
And like, mind you, I just came from reading about like the Charles Manson case, and insane.
You
like,
can
how
see
much the police can drop the ball and get away with it. So it makes sense. Or like a district attorney's office, like dropping the ball, not like following through with what they're supposed to do. So this is not necessarily all that far-fetched from what can happen in reality.
Innocent people. And that's one thing, like, even with, like, Ted Bundy and stuff like that, like, the way that he was able to get off, they were like, oh, he's so handsome. Like, the police are like, we're not going to investigate him. He's a good-looking guy. One of the people that it could possibly be is Scott Summers, the mistress's husband, widowed husband. He is a police officer, and they don't even go down that road at all where he could have possibly murdered his wife whenever there's, like, evidence of him being abusive. And, like, he, like, even texted her, like, I'm gonna kill you or something. And
Are we getting into this spoiler zone?
I don't think that's a spoiler, because it happens pretty early on in the story. But I do think, like, that it's interesting that, like, basically the only, like, they have a bunch of different suspects, which, like, they don't really go into. But the police immediately arrest Adam, and they basically say that it's him the entire time. They don't really, even though there's so many different avenues, which Sarah ends up exploring herself, and you get her perspective of her going into all these different possibilities of who it could be. The police are like, oh, it's Adam. That's all we're doing. It's Adam. Like, it's an open and shut case whenever they don't even do any actual police work, really. Which, I mean, it's definitely, I can understand him being the primary suspect. It's his mistress. It happened in his bed. They found her murdered in his bed after he had just spent the night with her. So, like, there is that where he doesn't have an alibi and stuff like that, but then there's also, like, many other things that are shown later on throughout the book where it shows that there is so many other different people it could be. And I don't know, we can maybe do an official spoiler warning now if you're interested in the book. I'll do a transition. Spoiler warning.
So we can officially segue into the meat and potatoes of the story.
But I would say that if you're interested in a book talk thriller, if you really like book talk books, it's a very easy read. I promise you can read it in a couple hours. Like, it'll be so quick. It's an easy read. If you need that book to get to your book goal for the year, if you're like, oh, I need 2 more books from my book goal, this will be one that'll get you right over that edge. I mean, and it's like decently long. It's like 340-ish pages, I think. So I'd say if you're interested, if you like thrillers, just don't expect anything like amazing. It's nothing amazing. It's nothing like, no 5-star read. But it is, I think, a decently written thriller that keeps you on the edge of your seat and keeps you interested in reading the next chapter. I can definitely see this as being like one of those ones, like you're up late reading and you were like, oh, I'll just go to sleep as soon as I finish this chapter. But then once you finish the chapter, like, damn it, I can't finish it. You know, I have to keep reading.
Yeah, it's a really good book to get you out of a reading slump if you've been in
it definitely got me out of a reading slump. I think I ended up reading 3 books this month. But I think this was the most books I've read in a month since we finished the Throne of Glass series. That series put me in a fucking slump. We finished that in like, what, May or June? And I do think The Perfect Marriage is a great book to get you out of a reading slump if you're really just looking for something easy to read. But we can go into official spoilers now, since I know Mariah's, like, fiending.
I'm sitting on the edge of my seat. I have lots of thoughts.
And it's hard too, because I feel like now, well, because we read this before I think we officially had decided to do a podcast too, so we kind of both know each other's perspectives on it and stuff like that. So I feel like that's kind of something we're gonna have to get better about, is not texting each other updates as we're reading throughout, because that's what for Good Omens, I haven't texted you, like, I've sent you a few quotes from whenever I read it, but I have not, like, told you anything that I've been, like, thinking about it or anything like that, because I think it would be better if we both go in, like, not knowing what the other person's thinking as is on my desk.
It'll make it more fun.
Yeah. Because, like, this, like, we were both texting each other, like, as we'll be like, oh my fucking god, I can't believe this just happened, sort of thing.
So, like, what? Okay, let's go through it point by point. How does this book start off? They're in their house, having, like, a cutesy little, it's the anniversary.
Yeah. Like, oh, where
she buys her husband the bougie watch.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm gonna go. She says, I'm gonna go work. I gotta work late because she's a workaholic.
Yes. She's a lawyer.
He's like, okay, I'm gonna go to
our vacation home and write my fancy novel, which apparently he's not a very well-known author, but he said his book is a cult classic in some communities. Whatever that means. And I wish...
Okay, buddy.
Like, I feel like average, like, white man writing a book, like, sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like, almost like a podcaster white man sort of vibes is kind of what I get from Adam, where, like, he's cheating on his wife because his wife is pretty much more successful than what him is, like.
We could just get into Adam as an individual throughout
this
entire book. He is not likable in any way.
And you get his perspective too, which I hated. I was like, why are we getting his perspective? Which I get, like, now that finishing the book and stuff like that. Like, I understand why we get his perspective, but, like, I didn't want his perspective in any way, shape, or form. It probably would have been better if it was more... Again, I say this for every fucking book I read. If it was third person, point of view, third person omniscient, it would be the best book. It would be better. It wouldn't be the best book. I don't think there's no way that you can make this book the best book.
No, but, like, Adam, throughout the entire book, is this privileged little shit who has everything given to him.
Definitely.
From his wife, who works very hard for her, and his mother, who babied the fuck out of him. And he's just like, well, I'm innocent, so, like, I should just
get to do whatever I want. Yeah. So I can't get arrested. What? Like, that doesn't happen.
And lo and behold, it does happen.
I don't think arrested. If Adam was a real person, I wouldn't think that he would deserve to die or, like, anything like that. But since he's a book character, I'm glad he died at the end of this. I think he fucking deserved it, and I hate him.
Yeah, on your Joker moment.
Yeah.
Get what you fucking deserve.
He does.
Well, I think that was, like, the main thing, is it's supposed to be, like, well...
Like revenge porn, almost. Like...
And I feel so conflicted, because it almost leans a little into, like, carceral feminism, where it's like, oh, we can just solve the problems of patriarchy
just by being a girl boss. I was getting such Barbie vibes. Like, it was, like, giving me, like, almost, like, Barbie vibes. Like, I was like, oh, like, women who love Barbie are gonna eat this up. You know, because they were like, oh, the girl boss gets the last laugh, sort of thing. And we're just gonna let, like, a murderer walk around, do whatever. Because, like, she has no remorse. She's a terrible character, too, Sarah does. Like, she murdered a virtually innocent woman. And we're just supposed to, like, cheer her on. Because, like, that's how the book ends. It ends up being her that murdered her husband's mistress, and she pinned it on her husband. So then she basically killed 2 people, and not even including her mother, which she technically killed too, which they reveal at the end too. Remember? Because, like, at the ending, it ends with, like, her talking about, it's like, oh, because, like, it's like a whole thing where, like, her mother's dead, and she's very traumatized by her mother because her mother was a drug addict, and her mom was depressed, and her mom maybe neglected in caring for her because her father died whenever she was younger, I think. And so she ended up, like, becoming, like, a sex worker to pay for drugs and stuff like that. And I feel like that portrayal of, like, a drug user is so negative and such a harmful stereotype. She was depressed, her mom was, and then she was like, oh, well, I just put the extra heroin deal and gave her more than what she needed to kill her.
It's hard watching it, or, like, not watching it, because, like, reading through this book, because you know that, like, the material conditions are what lead people to do these things. We
Mm-hmm.
live in a capitalist society, so it's not as though people are just doing these things because they just want to do them. Like, bad things happen to you.
Yeah.
So the
And
solution
addiction is a terrible disease. Like, she doesn't even discuss how, like, addiction and depression are the diseases her mom suffers with. She was just like, oh, my mom just gave up on me. Like, she gave up on herself a long time ago before she gave up on you, kid. And, like, I think the way to portray it as, like, that her mother was 100% neglectful and stuff like that, where it's like, obviously her mother was doing good enough before her father died, so then maybe you should assess, like, what happened within that sort of thing, you know? She made it seem like it was only her father that was, like, doing anything for her home and her family before she died, which is so anti-feminist of her, for real. Oh, sorry, the dad has to be the breadwinner? Okay. And, like, I think it's interesting, too, because she was like, well, it gives them off, like, such, like, the liberal thing where it's like, well, if you just work hard and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. My mom was a heroin user, and I had to work really hard and work 2 jobs to pay for myself throughout high school and college, and I got a full ride scholarship, and now I'm this very successful attorney.
Yeah, it's her moving through this, like, glass feminist utopian story that she's built for herself. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Sarah goes to college, and I imagine them like, the author including that in the very end of the book is trying to give you some insight on as to, like, why she was so career driven,
Mm-hmm.
to, like, be away from that, be this girl boss, be self-sustaining.
Which is, like,
But then she marries her college sweetheart, and
mm-hmm.
she supports him in his dreams.
Yeah. I just don't even understand, like, I don't even understand, like, what made her, like, flip the switch on Adam so quickly, too. Like, as soon as she found out he was cheating on her with some other woman, she, like, immediately, like, this is supposed to be, like, the love of your life sort of thing. Like, I understand you're upset that, like, your husband cheated on you, but then, like, she just, like, I feel like if it were me, like, in my relationship, I've been with my boyfriend for almost 8 years this month. It'll be 8 years, and I think that, and they were together for longer than that. I think they were celebrating their 10-year anniversary, I think, when the book begins. And I think that if I were to find out, obviously, I guess I'm, like, more of a sane person than she is, but I don't think I would go murder his mistress, sort of thing. Like, I don't know, like, I'd be upset and, like, hurt, and I would break up with him, but I don't think I would, like, oh, well, I guess I can just kill her, you know? Like, it seems like such an extreme
It's with, like, the
solution.
circumstances that, like, Kelly is being murdered. It's not just because she's the mistress. It's also because of her past. And Bob, another one of the attorneys at the practice, comes up to Sarah and is telling her that he wants to get rid of her because of how she wronged his brother somehow.
She killed his brother. It's implied
We don't
that something
know for sure,
happened.
though.
And I feel like, and then they paint poor Kelly, this woman that got murdered, as, like, this floozy that's sleeping around with everybody. You know what I mean? Whenever you don't even know, like, because towards the end of the book, they end up finding 3 semen samples inside of her, which 2 of them are assumed to be her husband, and then Adam, of course, because that's who she's cheating on her husband with, Adam. The 3rd one is a mystery. We don't know whose it is. We don't find out to the very end of the book that it ends up being the sheriff on the case that was, like, doing the police work and stuff like that, where it's implied. I don't know if it's implied that she was sleeping with him, or if even the sheriff could have been raping her or something like that. Where it doesn't even go into that in any way, shape, or form, because we don't know like what the sheriff has to say about it, really.
Oh, because like the whole point of including that in there is to reinforce this like whorephobia
Yeah, like, oh, she's a
mindset of
slut,
like
so, and
you
like
can't keep it down to one person, which I get. Like the adultery aspect of it can be frustrating, but men do it all the time.
yeah, so like when men do it, it's just fine. Like, to be honest, I feel like if it were me, like, I'd be more likely to murder my boyfriend over cheating on me than his mistress, you know? But from Kelly's perspective, we know, because we get Adam's point of view, that Adam did tell Kelly that he does have a wife. But from Sarah's perspective, who says that she knows that Adam was married? Adam could have been like, oh, this is my bachelor pad, I'm a bachelor, sort of thing. From, like, Sarah's perspective, she does not know that Adam is cheating on a wife, necessarily.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yes. Like, Sarah, like, because I don't know how much research Sarah did into this whole, like, obviously she planned this entire thing out and she was able to murder his mistress and get away with it. But, you know, like, she doesn't know Sarah.
Part of it, she had, like, the private investigator, which was also the reporter that is working with Adam.
Yes, but then it wasn't actually.
That was for a different thing.
That was about, because
this is where the plot holes come in, where
she
starts
said,
to get
I don't
funny.
remember the reporter's name, but the reporter is supposed to be, she, like, shows up at, she's like a private investigator that Sarah says, Scott Summers, which is Kelly's widowed husband, Sarah says that this reporter is actually a private investigator that Scott Summers hired to do more research on Adam, to basically pin the murder on him. Whenever it was actually like a private investigator that she hired herself or something like that to get Adam off of Sarah's case, basically, to like cover her tracks. To keep him like, is like, oh, look at me with this hand while I do something else with this hand, sort of thing. And it
works.
Yeah. Well, because Adam's also an idiot. Like, how do you escape? He escapes from the police, what? Twice? 3 times? Twice.
Well, he's out on bail.
And then he leaves.
And then
he gets arrested again, and then he escapes then. So twice. Because he's, like, on the run, and then he goes to her house. She, like, calls the police on him. Arrest again. So, like, if you're trying to prove that you're innocent, I don't, like, obviously I know, like, being innocently arrested, that is something that happens to millions of, I don't know about millions of Americans. I don't know how often it happens, like, statistically. I know it's, like, a significant amount of people do get wrongfully arrested and stuff like that. But I don't think, first of all, hiring your wife as your lawyer, dumbest mistake of your life. Why would you do that? You'd probably be better. Your wife is rich. You think she could, I would argue more. You're married. You can definitely use those funds to get a real defense attorney for you. 2, don't escape the police. Like, why would you run away? And, like, he ran away to, like, I get it. If you wanted to run away to your mommy and she would get you away, like, his mom was, like, ride or die for him. Like, need me a mom like that for real.
But motherfucker runs away to the reporter's house.
Yes.
Because he's like, I love you.
He doesn't even love her. He's like...
But he's, like, trying to mac on her, like, kiss her and...
Yeah. He's like, oh, you know I'm innocent, so we can get away with this, sort of thing. And it's like, I don't think you should be... If you're out, you should not be focusing on proving yourself innocent. You should just be getting the fuck out of Dodge. You know what I mean? Because eventually they'll give up on you. I promise the police don't care that much. You'll get out. You know? And his mom's rich too. Because, like, his dad, I think, was supposed to be, like, some hedge fund manager or something. Some big bad... And he died before the events of the books take place. And, like, he even calls his mom. I was like, hey, I'm out. Like, I'm gonna get to your hotel. And she's like, that's fine, baby. I love you. His mom's batshit insane. Like, I wish my mom was like that, kind of, because she loves her kid for real. Like,
like, throwing the mommy issues.
Like, he's got mommy issues, but I don't know if it's just because his mom's just a shitty person. And, like, but, like, she's not shitty in the way that she is for, like, a regular mom. She's just, like, shitty in that she cuddles.
Almost has, like,
I feel like it's such a boy mom.
him.
It's like it's like a boy, really, like, does. The boy mom, like, TikTok thing where there's like the TikTok trend where like the boy
I'm
moms are like
teaching
when
my
I
son how to cook so that he
he's
can have good food and not just take out every
or it's
night
like
or
when I realize my son has to get married to a woman and he'll leave me forever sort of thing. Like, have you seen that like on TikTok?
it's scary.
It is genuinely terrifying. So, and I think that's definitely like you can see it in Eleanor too, where she resents Sarah. She hates her daughter-in-law. I don't know. I don't think that's like a really a normal thing. Like, I feel like that's just like really creepy moms where that happens, where they do that sort of thing. Adam's an idiot.
Almost
Sarah's crazy.
feel like I talked about today on TikTok with like parents viewing their children as like property that
Oh
they own
yeah,
them,
and I
like
do
they're
think
not their own beings, and she doesn't treat Adam like he's his own being who's able to like make good decisions
for an adult,
or an adult.
which I mean, like honestly, she might be right because of how he ended up getting himself in pretty big of a pickle, if you ask me. But and then he's so stupid. Like I don't like that. I think the most realistic thing about this is how shoddy the police work is because
That's why the rating is so high that I gave it, is
that's
because
what
of
I
the
was like. I
police
was
work,
like, damn, this is kind of
the district
real.
attorney's office was like, and like people just wasting tax dollars for like the death penalty
Mm-hmm.
for nothing. It's not
Literally,
preventing anything.
no. And like, because apparently he wrote, after he got arrested and is in prison, he's in prison for like 10 years and then he gets like killed, which I don't think is accurate at all. I'm pretty sure, like, with the death penalty, it's a lot longer than just 10 years. People usually are on death row for. And I think most of the time, most people actually end up dying in prison before they die on death row because of like how long the process is. Whenever they could have just given him life in prison, and it virtually would have done the same thing
And I
without
think a lot of
taking.
people end up getting exonerated of their crimes as well
Yes,
while they're on death row.
yes, it is like a big statistic of people where it's like I want to say like 25% or something like that of people are actually innocent that are on death row. And a lot of the people that are on death row too, everyone's like, oh, we should do death row for like mass murders and stuff like that. The only people, like most of the people that I think are on death row, I actually made a TikTok video about this long time ago, like back in 2020, where like most of the people on death row aren't even on death row for murdering like more than 2 people. Like they're all murderers that are on death row, but it's not like they like none of like the mass shooters and stuff that have been arrested in the last couple of years are on death row. Like it's all like people that are more like I think gang related crime are the people that are on death
It's
row.
disproportionately like black men, which
It
is
is
how it's always been
yes.
set up. Like in
Yes.
Angela Davis's Woman, Race, and Class,
Mm-hmm.
she has a whole chapter about it and how it
Yes.
was used as a tool after like
After
the
slavery
Civil
ended,
War,
yeah.
because it was like protecting white women because they
Yeah.
were like making up these like fake rape charges, and that is what they
Mm-hmm.
were being tried for.
Mm-hmm.
And just like see that, and then see this book portraying death
Which
penalty
I mean,
and
the thing is that
oh,
like, and it does happen to white men too. And I think there maybe only be like 1 or 2 women that are actually on death row. I don't think women get the death penalty nearly as often as men do. For one thing, men are more likely to get death row, but men are also more likely to get arrested. Like I think there's like, it's like only like it's like 17% of all like of the prison population is women. Like it's so small. Like women are just not like as mass incarcerated as men, and I don't know if it's just because of like the specific like power dynamic in that sort of way where like women are like, well, there's no point in like wrongly accusing women for any crimes or like arresting women because like their labor is not as valued because they're women
I
are
mean, that's what it could be, because they want that labor, so
the
they're trying to
slave labor.
extract the
Yeah.
most amount as they possibly can, so they would likely
Mm-hmm.
source it in the areas that they know, and we know what demographic of people are likely to get put into the prison industrial complex with
Mm-hmm.
like school to prison pipeline.
Exactly.
So
Where it's like I think it's like something where like if you don't graduate high school, you're like it's like you're in like the chance of you getting arrested like like going to jail is like so highly increased. It's kind of insane that it's like we don't put anything in place to actually help these people. It's such a bizarre concept to me. And I
this bitch Sarah, right, is using US tax dollars to keep her husband on death row so she can legally get away with murdering him.
yes, cuz once
Because it
she's
costs
dead,
millions of dollars.
mm-hmm. Well, because she
But the
murdered
working class people are paying for that.
Yes. And one thing, too, is that it talks about how great of a criminal defense attorney she is. And so at the beginning of the book, she's defending a rapist. The man gets off not guilty, of course, because I don't know if that's supposed to be because she's just such a great lawyer or if he's actually innocent. They don't really ever say specifically if he's actually innocent or not. But I know it's supposed to be like some type of... It's implied that I think he is innocent because it's like some like big oil company is trying to get this senator arrested for raping a woman. So that because he like blocked some like bill or something like that this oil company is wanting to push or something, which is supposed to be something with like pollution and stuff like that. And it's always like, oh, the white women are always going to care more about pollution than they actually are going to care about innocent lives being taken, you know? And that's why I almost feel like climate change is like a bigger issue with like liberals and stuff like that than like the prison industrial complex. Do you know what I'm saying? Like they always care about climate change, which climate change is a big issue. I'm not like downsizing climate change at all, but
you can't like care about climate change but not also like look at corporate America and how like who is responsible for climate change.
Exactly. Which are these people
that just the people that don't use reusable straws or reusable water bottles.
And it's a
lot bigger than just that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that like I think even if it's like they've done like studies and stuff where it's like even if everyone used reusable straws and reusable bags and took the bus and stuff like that, like BP and stuff like that does so much more pollution that it literally does not matter if you decide to stop using a plastic straw and use a paper straw instead. It's just so like, what's that word where it's like these companies
like a red herring, like just throwing out like, oh, you can be the change you want to see in this world.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's easier than
actually confronting the issue
or acknowledging like with us that like working class solidarity and like building coalitions and movements to end capitalism, that would be significantly
that's what's going to stop climate change is dismantling capitalism. There's literally
a good job at like hyperfixation on like individualism versus.
And I think that's one thing that this book does is it very much individualizes it. And I don't think that's a good thing for like Marxist reading overall. And I think that's one thing that I think differentiates Marxists from your average liberal or conservative or somebody that's not even on like any type of Marxist spectrum is that they are so individualized. It's always about me, myself, the people I know and stuff like that, which it's fine to be like that because like everyone's going to be a little bit biased towards themselves. They're going to be selfish towards their friends and their family sort of thing. Like obviously like I'd rather care about like if you were to like something were to happen to you, I would be more invested in that than I would be than some random person on the internet that I've never met. Obviously, because even though you're just some random person on the internet that I've never met. But the idea of that, like, obviously I'm going to have more of a personal bias and a more, like, in that everyone's going to do that. Like, but I think one thing that we as Marxists, we do try to broaden and, like, contextualize everything in, like, a bigger picture that I don't think enough people do. I'd say that, like, you and I
have to be empathetic.
Mm-hmm. And I think
you have to care
about your fellow man.
Like, that's what makes us different is that we're not just focused on like our individual gains, but like the gains of our community.
And I think that's why I think there's so many more conservative and liberals like in the United States and in other places is that like I don't know if it's that I don't think they lack empathy. I think anybody can learn empathy. The idea is that I don't know if it's just something that like since people it's not in anybody's face. And I think
and also we've been socialized from such a young age because of our institutions and lobbyists determine what kind of education that children are being taught. They aren't being taught the broader world view, and it is all very specific, very limited. We have a very myopic view on the world. And I know people in like England and stuff like to joke about how we just don't have any like awareness about like geopolitics or anything, and they're not wrong, but also
it's not taught to us, like especially before the internet, like any day before the internet. No wonder like Americans were so conservative. They don't talk about any other country. You never learn any of this. Like, you have to go out of your way to specifically learn anything that's going on in any other country. I mean, you can ask the average American, what's going on in the Afghanistan war? They don't know because they don't talk about it. That's nothing that the media or, like, the government is going to talk about. They're going to do all the stuff behind closed doors because they know it gives them a negative light.
Like, we can take that even, like, a step further and reference pieces of work like Inventing Reality by Michael Parenti, or Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky, where the economic ruling class, these big the bourgeoisie, are like paying for the media to also
Yes.
prevent or present a different narrative
Mm-hmm.
of what's happening in the world. So even as an adult, when you're trying to consume media and learn about the world, it's still being
Censored.
funneled, it's
Yeah.
being filtered to what they want you to see. So I feel like a conspiracy theorist. I feel
I
like I
know.
need to pull out
And
my
it's
like tinfoil hat.
so crazy too that, like, you'll see these right-wing conservatives that are like, the media is doing this. It's like, the media is doing this, but who's running the media are the capitalist overlords that are sitting here exploiting, like, stealing your surplus labor value.
What? It's not the lizard people, Mark Zuckerberg.
No, and
Like,
that's, I mean, it is
you
Mark
know, like they,
Zuckerberg, but
but they take like they get close, but then they take the like white supremacist, alt
hmm
right, like
and it's
anti-Semitic
just like, it's
pill, and it's
so
just like,
crazy how
bruv, no.
it's, like, so infuriating because, like, they're living in Kentucky. You end up talking to so many conservatives. Like, you kind of don't have a choice. Like, there are very few. I mean, I surround myself with, like, communist people and people that, like, know communists. But I feel like majority of the people, like, since I live in the bigger city, there's more liberals, but it's very conservative liberals. It's very much moderate Democrats at most. Like, that's the most you're gonna get left wing pretty much here. Of course, we do have some, like, leftist spaces and communist spaces and stuff like that, but they're very minuscule, I think, especially being in Kentucky because of, like, the Red Scare and stuff like that. But I will have so many conversations, I swear to God, with conservative people, and I will tell them my beliefs, and they're like, yeah, I agree with you on literally everything. And I'm like, okay, so I'm a communist. You know that, right? Like, I'm a communist.
Read Marx.
Like, it's so crazy. Like, I
Like,
remember, like, I'll be like, oh, I'm a communist. They're like, what? What the fuck? I don't agree with anything you say anymore. It's like, what? Like, I literally just put, like, an ideology behind, there's specific writings and ideologies that back up my statements, and then you hear that scary, hear Karl Marx, you hear communists, and you run for the hills. But I will literally have conversations with conservatives, and they straight up and be like, yes, I agree with you 100%. And I'm like, so you believe in communist ideas? No, I do not. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And then it's like, everyone's like, oh, well, and then there's always, like, those, like, conservatives that are like, oh, I love having conversations with people that I have different opinions of. And I don't think, like, fundamentally, nobody has, like, that big of different opinions. I think most people are genuinely empathetic, and they actually care, and they want the country to go in a right place. But I just don't think they have the comprehension. They don't have the knowledge behind, like, reading Marx to fully understand where they could be led if they actually consume something other than shitpost media, like book talk
yeah, because
books.
it seems like a lot of what like mainstream like US politics is focuses on very, I don't know, like
Fear mongering.
polarizing
Mm-hmm.
like topics like abortion or whatever. But at the end of the day, like when you get to the root issue of like a lot of the issues, whether it be, where am I going with this?
You just gotta
Like
keep talking till
like
it
it's
comes.
just like surface level. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of surface level issues
Yes.
that like people bicker about without realizing that if you were just to address the root cause of a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these issues, the surface level problems probably wouldn't be as big of a deal.
And I think what's so interesting too, like, because you brought up abortion specifically, is that, like, that's something that I think, like, majority of Americans, like, agree with Roe v. Wade and stuff like that. They, like, don't want it to be overturned and stuff like that. But then it's just, like, the vocal minority that everyone hears about, and then that's something that makes it so that, like, that's what becomes the topic of discussion instead of having true, like, in-depth conversations about, like, the political sphere we're in and, like, why that's the only conversation that anybody talks about.
Speaking of abortion, do we want to talk about the double homicide
Oh, the
of
double
this case?
homicide. Oh my god, I completely forgot about that.
The unborn Victims
Fetus.
of
Yeah.
Violence Act pulled through in this case
Oh,
because Kelly
what does
Summers
it
was pregnant.
does it say what? Oh, they live in D.C., Washington, and then
Hmm.
I think technically the murder happened in like Virginia or something really close to there because like D.C.'s like not a state. I didn't even think. I completely forgot that happened. Where I guess I don't even know like what the law specific. But yeah, I guess that is something that like you didn't even discuss about how like it ends up. You end up finding out later on that Kelly was pregnant. I don't think she was very far along. Like probably, I bet she still could have gotten an abortion in D.C. Even if. So I don't even think that's like I don't know how long you have to be pregnant for it to be double homicide. But then they find out, of course, it's Adam's baby.
She must have been far enough along where they could do like a DNA test, though.
How long is that? I don't know. I don't have kids.
I don't know. I mean, they'd have to be bigger than like a blastocyst, right? They'd
I
have to be
didn't think
like
she was supposed to be that
8 to
pregnant
10
because he
weeks.
didn't know. You know, like
See, this is another plot hole. It's kind of a
like
little
I feel like it
sus.
definitely has to like she did. I feel like you have to be. I thought like the whole thing is that you can't even like know the baby like who the father is until after it was born or something. Or maybe that could have been something that Sarah was doing just to like get into his head.
Who knows? This book was fucking weird.
It was weird. Better than Haunting Adeline, I will say that. I'm sure you probably don't think that.
You're gonna have to do a tier list.
Oh yeah,
Haunting Adeline's gonna be at the bottom for you.
yeah. Last place, bro. The worst book I've ever read ever.
You're welcome.
I think. Thank you for recommending it. I will definitely. I cherish all of your recommendations now, Rye. Like every time, I'm like, oh yeah. I guess to like wrap up, final thoughts about this is that like it's an interesting story, and I do think it is probably the most accurate portrayal of the police I've ever read. Because like, how many homicides are even solved? I'll look that up.
I mean, they only solve like 11% of crime or something stupid. Better odds playing blackjack than you would having a homicide
getting
be solved that you need. Yeah.
So, murder, 50% of them are solved. Manslaughter, 69% solved. Rape, 30% are solved. Assault, 47% are solved. And robbery is 27%. Crazy. They don't solve anything. So basically, only if you get murdered, there's only half a chance.
You know, you probably have a better chance of like
someone else solving it for you.
No, I was gonna say it's like the police, like their statistics are usually more higher in like their own domestic abuse cases than they are like solving crime.
Yeah,
like it's like a 40% chance that like a police wife is gonna get like beat by their husband.
Yes, it's insane.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, well, that's because like I don't know. It's just such a crazy like statistic where it's like if 40% of teachers are like beating their children, do you think there would be the same teachers that are teachers right now? Like, just imagine that statistic in your head. Do you know? Like, what even makes, like, what benefit does that even have for, like, general, like, regular old conservatives and liberals? Like, what is there? I feel like this is something I guess I need to find a liberal and talk to them. Like, what do they truly think the benefits of the police are? They don't solve any cases. They beat their wives.
Period.
They do the most like menial shit. They'll pull you over for speeding.
Well, and I think part of it is like it goes back to like what we're raised to believe.
Mm-hmm. And I do think a lot of the younger
they don't know of an alternative. They're like, well, what else is there?
There's definitely, but then the thing is too is that like you look at like these areas, and then there's always like a neighborhood watch sort of thing too. Like, so you understand that the police aren't doing anything to prevent crime or solving crime in your area, and that is why you created a neighborhood watch to prevent crime.
Community policing? Oh my god, a communist concept.
Because you always see that, like, this home is a part of the neighborhood watch or whatever, you know? Where it's just, like, nosy people. I think that's something that I don't think I've read in, like, a book talk book where it's actually, like, talked about how incompetent the police are. And I wouldn't argue that this book is a leftist book or communist book in any way, shape, or form either.
No, but, like, just, it's, like, unintentionally
based. It's very unintentionally based. I was reading that, like, damn, this sounds like the police. Because, like, the book ends up following Sarah where she has to do all of the police work herself. which I know she probably kind of like made it that way so that she can intentionally like hide her own evidence and stuff like that, where I guess that's like supposed to be the idea. But I do think like in general that is exactly how the police would act in most of these situations. As you can see, the statistics show, some estimate that those in U.S. or prison, 1% are falsely convicted. Others estimated that it may be as much as 4 to 6%. As discussed in a recent blog, many folks who are actually innocent plead guilty to crimes they didn't commit. Is that another form of wrongful conviction? In the United States, 26% of those exonerated since 1989 pleaded guilty. So 26%, so 1 out of 4 people that pleaded guilty were actually exonerated later on. And that's something too that so Adam ends up writing a book about his experience because he is innocent, and we know now that he is innocent. And he wrote a book basically saying like, I'm innocent. Or, like, I guess he goes through, we don't really learn anything about the book, but since he was in prison, he wasn't able to keep any of those funds for himself, even though he wrote the book in prison, which is so fucked up too, because like he's not even able to keep his own money to use for like the commissary or anything that like can genuinely benefit his stay. Even if they didn't find him as guilty, I feel like that's his own like labor that he did, and he doesn't even get like the fruits of his labor in any way, shape, or form. But then he's able to donate it to like a charity that like tries to exonerate wrongly convicted people, which is so sad that we need those kind of, like, if we didn't have death row, we wouldn't. It wouldn't be something that would have to be like such a high priority on people's lists.
Yeah, I don't have anything else.
I don't really either. I think this is definitely like, I don't know, but the way that Sarah is written in this book, she is very much written as like the hero, even though she's a cold-blooded murderer who's murdered technically 3 people and gets to live a happy life and feels no remorse for her actions. Where like, that's like straight up a psychopath. Like, isn't that like by definition?
Doesn't she name the daughter like Summer? Like Kelly Summer, like she names her after,
I didn't know
like,
she
the
named her
girl she killed.
Summer. That's fucked up. I didn't know she named her Summer. Her name is Summer. I didn't even make that connection. That she named her kid Summer? That's disgusting.
I didn't either until I was looking through like the Goodreads, like, and I saw that on there, and I was like, oh my god,
What?
this bitch was crazy.
She's literally like insane. Like, lock her up. We don't support like prisons, but like some people need help, and she's very clearly. Oh, and we didn't even talk about how she
goes straight to the gulag.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about how she ended up with Bob. What the fuck? Like, I read that and I literally went, ugh, whenever I saw his name. Tyler could, because I was sitting on the couch reading it, and I go, ugh, and he goes, what? And I'm like, nothing. Just something happened that I didn't want to happen, because I was like, the way that she like described him, I imagine like a bald, old, sweaty old man, you know, that was like stereotypically, he's like sexist, he's like terrible to her. He's like really shitty to her all throughout the book. And then it's like, oh, it just so happens that it's actually like a cool dude that I ended up marrying. Or like that's like where she's going off to, is her wedding. And like, he has a daughter with him, even though she never wanted kids.
It will give you the ick. So I think that's like the whole thing with the ending of this book is it's like a twist that gives you physical revulsion.
I was literally like I thought it was interesting whenever it was like, oh, like she did it, like that was fine. I feel like you could have just ended it there with Bob, and then we had a kid together. Like, Bob, I thought she was gonna end up with Matthew more than I thought she was gonna end up with Bob, because like there was even that whole like line where like, so Matthew, we didn't even talk about him. He's just supposed to be some like rich, like stereotypically gay best friend sort of thing. I feel like that's like a whole conversation that could be had within itself about how Matthew is written. But what was I gonna say? Oh, like her like assistant Anne. We didn't even talk about Anne at all either. Where she was like, oh, where she's like, oh, he's so in love with you, and you're like, no, he's gay, and it's like, no, he definitely would switch teams for you. Not even talking about like, that's not even how like being gay works at all. Where it's not, it's definitely, I mean, it's a spectrum, but like if they're gonna say like, oh, this man is full-blown gay, then he's just gay, you know, like he just wants a man. He's not gonna be interested in, just because you're girl bossing like a man doesn't make you a man. you know?
This whole book just has a lot of really bad stereotypes and tropes.
Yeah. But then that's what makes it so entertaining is that it's like watching
It's like, can we get more?
yeah,
Is there
like
gonna be more?
I don't know, I was
It
looking
can't get worse.
like it's like I'd rather read a shitty book like this than watch a shitty like TV show. Just cuz I do feel like it's almost more like stimulating, which I don't mean that in like as like hey, if you like to watch shitty TV shows, like if you like watching the Jersey Shore, fuck you. You know what I mean? But me personally, I would rather read it in like a form that I feel like it's almost more entertaining to me than consuming it than just watching it. I feel like I don't know if it maybe makes me feel better about myself, like getting that number up, reading a book. But I think it's almost more entertaining with me because then you can sort of like make your own visualizations and headcanons where it's like I kind of do this like whenever I read a book where like if something kind of happens that I don't really like, if it's not like super major, I kind of like change it in my head to make it like work. You know? So like whenever I think that's one thing where like if I look back on a book, I'll always look at it more positively than whenever I first read it. Unless it's like a shitty book like Haunting Adeline. There's no fixing that book. You can't.
I don't even try to reason with it. I've just accepted it at this point.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. And that's almost at the point like where I'm at. Like I feel like since it does have like accidentally based things that happen to it, it makes it better than the QAnon fanfiction.
Yeah, but it's like accidentally based, like when Tucker Carlson goes on the air and says something about like the rich people are bad. Like
Yeah.
it's good, but it doesn't.
It definitely needs
It's
to.
still
This is
not
like the
great.
definition of like, you know, like that Twitter account accidentally based or something like that, where it'll post like conservatives like or like conservative self own sort of thing, where it's like they'll say something exactly right, and you're like, "Yep, you got it," and they're like, "But no, you're supposed to disagree with me." It's like, "But I don't because what you said is true." I don't know if you have any closing thoughts.
What are my closing thoughts? I think
You do recommend it to for someone to read.
if you're in like a reading slump, maybe if you just want to read, if you're at this point in the show, I'm assuming either you've read it or you're not gonna read it.
Yeah,
But for further reading or reading, not reading, for
reading.
further reading, you
We
could
do
check
have
out
a
like
list of books.
The End of Policing or The New Jim Crow, Women Raising Class by Angela Davis.
Why
There's
are
another one I
prisons
had on there.
obsolete?
Yes, In Defense of Looting. Those are all really good books.
That are definitely
I
because I'm
recommend.
assuming either if you're this far, you either read the book, and you either read the book and you wanted to get other people's opinions talking about it. 2, you're a Marxist that wanted to get Marxist thought on this. Or 3, you're a friend of me or Mariah.
Or if you want to read a nonfiction book that's about like true crime, like The Chaos book by Tom O'Neill, which just talks about how like garbage the police and investigative work can actually be.
Yeah.
Like that is like a perfect example of why this can be an accurate story.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's maybe something, if you're somebody who read this and you did not get that you thought like, oh, the police are absolutely incompetent, that would never happen, maybe you should definitely do some of this nonfiction reading. Or I know that there's definitely like, I'm assuming that if you read this book, if these are the types of books that you read where it's book talk books, which we and Mariah definitely no hate to, we're some of the biggest book talk consumers, we've read so much of them. Listen up like other people talking about this stuff. There's so many videos and like people talking about these books and stuff like that that you can consume on your own that maybe are more of like up your speed, where listening to an audiobook for it or something like that, where you can just even like doing the little bit of like nonfiction in compared to like what you do with your fiction read, I think does so much. Or even if it's just a small amount, even just listening to this podcast, I feel like is a big step for so many people, where I think if you thought anything that me and Mariah was interested in talking about, you can definitely message us on like at any of our social medias or like at Literary Liberation on TikTok. We can make videos about any of this stuff too, that if anybody wants something more in depth, or like I could definitely repost my back in 2020, a long time ago, I made 2 videos talking about the death penalty here in America and how it's virtually useless, and I did a lot of research on that. I actually am very proud of that video to this day. I don't know if you've seen it. You probably have, but it was so long ago. I'll have to send them to you again. But I do think they're just, like, generally informative about that stuff, and I think that's something that more people should just be generally informed on, even if it's not something that, like, you want to be 100% interested in. Just knowing stuff about that where you're more aware of your surroundings and more aware of the material conditions here in the United States, that's so much better for our movement specifically.
Yeah. What Kristen said.
But I guess if that's all we have to say, nothing else from you, Mariah?
No, that's all I've got. We went on a couple of tangents.
But other than that, thank you so much for checking out the second episode of Literary Liberation. Again, I'm Kristen. You can find me at KRXXTXN on all social medias. Or you can find me and Mariah both on any of the Literary Liberation on Instagram, TikTok, or LitLib on Twitter.
And I'm at Hungry Rye if you want to find me on any other social media platforms. And I'll also be posting, we'll probably try to post more like educational and like up and coming stuff on our social media, like the collective page.
We need to decide what our next book is going to be too. We'll definitely, so follow us on all of our social medias. Definitely, we'll post about it. Well, once we decide on a book, we'll post all over Literary Liberation, anywhere, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We will post what our next podcast will be on, since we have not planned that far ahead. This is kind of a last minute like recording for us. It's almost 2 a.m. where I am right now, and I think it's pretty late for Mariah too. Mariah usually goes to bed at like 8 o'clock, so.
Yeah, I'm old. But
again, thank you guys for watching, listening, wherever you got your podcast from, and check us out on your other social medias.